Welcome back. It's 2023, new year, new swing pass, new season of AUDL coming up in the next few months, and the hot stove is kicking right now. We've got a full show for you here today. Houston has announced a GM and a head coach for their first season. The Seattle Cascades have signed a cadre of core playmakers heading into 2023. Minnesota, after making multiple playoff appearances, has signed 3 star-worthy veterans, and a legend has announced his departure from the Chicago Union. Certainly going to shake up the Central Division, as well as play into the West's future going into 2023. We can't quite tell you where he'll end up, but Pawel Janas is on his way to a new home. Daniel, we've got a full docket here to cover today. Where should we start?
Let's start with Houston, right? I mean, new head coach, new GM. This is the time of year where, rosters are going to start to take shape pretty quickly. So just having everything set for tryouts. I know they got their tryouts and combine coming up in just a few weeks. I'm excited for Houston this year. I really am not sure what to expect, but that makes it a cool situation.
So the Houston Havoc have announced for their inaugural season Sean McCall as their first GM, and Bex Forth, the first head coach of the Houston Havocs. Forth having had experience as the founder, player, and de facto coach for the Eurostars tour that ran from 2017 through 2019 before the pandemic derailed that perennial summer tour that came over here and showcased some of the top European talent against some of the top U.S. national talent in the women's division. And I think it bears mentioning, the first year Eurostars kind of struggled. It was a collection of some of the best players, but they had never practiced before. They're going up against some of the top competition in the world, and you could just see the talent was there, but the cohesion wasn't quite. But those final 2 summers, the Eurostars team kind of ran the table against their North American counterparts, and I think a big part of that was I don't want to say tactics, but you could clearly see her taking a central part in most of the team huddles that Bexforth provided. And I'm really interested to see what her impact will be on this Havoc team and kind of forming the initial cast of what Houston is going to be in this league.
So you probably have a better sense of the Eurostars and are more familiar with Bex her game than I am. Did you see anything in those teams? Yeah. Did you see anything, I guess, in her play style or in those Eurostars games that were notable, or that you could see like her bringing an interesting perspective to a new AUDL team? Anything in particular?
2 things stood out to me. One was their ability to get their handler resets and just general backfield chemistry on the same page so quickly. I mean, everyone's going to have throwing talent. I think what a coach or what management can really provide is a system for it to flourish in. And I think you saw the Eurostars implement that on the fly so well. I mean, again, you're talking about team that didn't practice going against some of the top defenses in the world in Brute Squad, Fury, Seattle Riot, these championship decorated teams. And the Eurostars didn't have a whole bunch of problems moving the disc. I think Forth, from her years of experience playing as a handler, but also just how her kind of mind works, is going to provide a great vision for how the handler play develops for this Houston Havoc team. The second thing that I think bodes well for the Havoc is that the Eurostars did such a good job transitioning into their counter looks. They were a very athletic group. They got a lot of blocks, and they were really good at applying pressure in transition to their opponents. I could see Houston, with the plethora of athletes down in the big, great state of Texas, being able to kind of put together something like that. Now, it bears mentioning that there are already 2 AUDL franchises in Texas in their division, in the Austin Soul and the Dallas Legion. Dallas was a perennial playoff team for numerous years. They had a big step back in 2021, but it looks like they're really getting set for a rejuvenated 2022. Austin Seoul is one of the most up-and-coming teams in the league, so it remains to be seen if Houston can maybe poach some of the talent away from those two teams or if they have to develop internally. But I really like this appointment of Forth to the helm. I've also heard really good things about Sean McCall. He comes up out of the Minnesota Ultimate Team. People have said he's a great people person, great motivator. So I just like these kind of two front office placements that Houston has announced generally. I think it bodes really well for them as they get prepared for their first season.
And the branding is coming along as well. Logo, colors, those will all be revealed very soon. It's been quite a process, but we're getting close.
I can speak to that too. I will say I'm very excited for the Houston Havoc's color schemes and logo and brand. It's going to be really fun, and I think something a little bit different from what we've seen throughout the rest of the league. But those announcements will come soon, I'm sure. But let's move right along. The Seattle Cascades have announced 8 returning players, and I'm going to try and name them all here. We've got Jack Brown, Dom Jacobs, Mark Munoz, Tommy Lynn, Zeppelin Ronig, the team's 2022 All-Star nomination, Kenny Lane, Tark Akyus, and the return of Garrett Martin, who, if you remember, played for Salt Lake in 2022, but was a huge part of Seattle's counterattack in 2021 as a rookie. Martin making an all-AUDL rookie team during that first season with the Cascades. He comes back. This is a huge get of young, developing talent. But as we were kind of talking about before this taping, Seattle as a franchise has won 7 games in the past 3 seasons. They have not made the playoffs since 2016 when the Cascades went to the championship game and lost to Dallas. Seattle has been known to have individual talent for years. Khalif El-Salam, Manny Eckert, Declan Miller, the guys in this list. But one of the things Seattle has never had for basically the past half decade now is consistency and results. There is always talent. There are always single games that impress us. 2021, they won at home against a Dallas team that was trying to make the playoffs in that great Friday night ultimate matchup. But other than kind of these here and there wins, it's been a lot of mediocrity for Seattle. And I think that the names here, the talent here has the chance to pull them out of it. But man, the West is a gauntlet right now for them to ascend.
It really is. I think Seattle's biggest issue the talent seems to be there, at least at times. Like, yeah, we'll get these really nice performances from Declan Miller, or especially early last year when he was putting up like 900-yard games like they were nothing. You mentioned Manny Eckert, Adam Simon, but it's all these guys that are only playing like a handful of games every year. So they haven't had like a go-to star maybe since those Mark Burton seasons where they had that same guy playing the entire season. And I think their core has a lot of potential because of their youth. So you kind of just assume this natural ascension and guys getting better every year, just playing more ultimate. But we're still kind of waiting to see, I guess, someone in that featured role really like take the next step to become like a true star for this team, and like a truly committed star is the other thing. And maybe that is Zeppelin Ronig or Jack Brown, like guys that have made plenty of highlights and had big games of their own, just haven't been able to string together enough to be truly impactful. But I think it's a good sign regardless, like assembling a nice core before tryouts too. These are typically the guys that are like the most bought in to sign early with the team. So I think it bodes well. But like you said, the West is just such a gauntlet to climb right now. I don't see them like making waves in like the playoff race, but they're still a team that can play with other teams depending on what roster they're fielding. So still excited to see Seattle play. I still think they have that fun home field advantage that maybe has been a bit overshadowed last season by Salt Lake and Colorado, who also came in with strong home crowds. But it's still something to hang Seattle's hat on. So I'm excited to see what they do in 2023 for sure.
I'm excited about Jack Brown. I'm excited about Zeppelin Ronig. I think another name that deserves mentioning, Dom Jacobs. I know he's kind of been used spot here and there, but that dude's got way too much
spark plug.
down. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he hasn't made a Sports Center appearance in the first 2 seasons, I think is an omission. I think that's coming for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, we've got too much to tackle here, and I think this back end is really going to be weighted because there's just so much to discuss about Central Division already. Let's start with
some heavy hitting stuff.
Minnesota has re-signed 3 of their best players in Abe Coffin, the All-Star Game MVP from this past fall, Dylan DeClercq, who's got 45 blocks over the past 2 seasons, one of the best takeaway artists in the division, if not the league as a whole, and then Quinn Snyder, who scored 50 goals for this Minnesota franchise in 2022. He was on the 2019 All-Rookie team. He is one of the most efficient scorers in league history. He's 4th in goals per game and 1st in basically possession metrics of how often you score per 10 possessions. He's just kind of a freak when it comes to finding the disc in the end zone. And I think it bodes really well for the Windchill's chances going into 2023. However, you and I both massively hyped Minnesota's signing of Abe Coffin, the talent gets they got last offseason. We really felt like 2022 was going to be their weekend to finally break through, finally make championship weekend over their rivals within that long, historic Central Division gauntlet. But they didn't do it. They lost for the 2nd straight season at Chicago to the Union. And though we've got
played a bad game too. That was a lopsided playoff game.
Yep. Well, in 2022 and 2021, they looked
2021 great game.
Great game. Great game.
The disappointments really escalated in 2022, I think.
Right. So Minnesota brings back this encouraging core. Minnesota is always going to be a deep, talented, athletic team. I think they've shown that now for the past 4 seasons or so of really pushing the limit of how they want to challenge their competitors within this division. But similar to Seattle in some ways, the results for what the expectations are for the Windchill have not quite gotten there yet. Do you think that these signings, and do you think with kind of the tribulations that this team has been going through trying to get on top of the Central Division finally, do you think that coupled with Minnesota hosting 2023 championship weekend, having that big extra carrot on the end of their stick, is this their season? Or do you think it goes to one of the other teams that has won Central in Indy or Chicago or Madison coming back after missing the playoffs for the last 3 seasons? What do you think these signings spell for the Windchill?
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's great they signed these 3 guys right off the bat. You kind of have one guy playing in different, one guy each playing in the different phases of their team defense. You had Coffin leading the counterattack, who obviously has offensive ability as well. Snyder dominating in the goal scoring category, and then DeClercq, who also scored a ton of goals himself on the D-line, really setting the tone from a block standpoint. I want it to be their year, but you're right. It is kind of, we're just back where we started in 2022. And I think, I don't know. I think the more I reflect on like the trajectory of the Central Division, I mean, I think we'll get to talk more about Pawel leaving Chicago. And I think that is probably the biggest thing that's going to make waves in the Central Division.
So
really,
let's just put it on the table then, because that deserves to be.
You want to jump into that first before we get further? Sure.
The biggest news I think this whole week is the league's all-time assist leader announcing.
Could have started with this. Yeah.
So Pawel Janas put out yesterday morning, or was it now 2 mornings ago? On Monday morning, Pawel Janas announced that he will be ending his 5-year tenure with the Chicago Union, leaving as the league's all-time leader in assists, completions. He's 2nd in hockey assists. He leads the franchise of Chicago in virtually every stat category that isn't goals or blocks. Points played, assists, completions, yardage, hucks, smiles, practices attended, workouts engaged, like everything. That franchise has been built off of Giannis's legwork the past few seasons. And now he's going to be leaving. The rumors are that he's going to be bought out by a team in the West Division and not one of the 3 playoff teams from last year. So it will be really interesting to see not only his effect from being removed from the Central Division, which he has punched and clawed his way to the top of through 5 grueling seasons with this Union franchise, to now going to the West, which we thought was starting to establish some of its hierarchy after this past season and getting an injection of 3 expansion teams. But now they're getting a legend injected into their landscape who's just going to, I think, cause waves in every direction around him. I mean, Janas himself is always going to downplay his effect, his sort of prominence in some of these lineups. But there's no doubt as to what that dude provides. It's winning, and it's a commitment to the cause that I think is maybe exceeded by 3 other players in this league. Like, I don't know. We can talk all about the statistics. We can talk all about how he engages with his teammates, what he provides. I don't know that there is a player in the league who grinds as hard as Janas has been grinding the past few years. He's been locked in. And I think
it's contagious, right? Like you see it throughout the team. It's what they've built around, and rightfully so. Like, I think it's another way to put it is there's this gravity to him that he brings wherever he goes, and like a giant planet or big body in space, like things warp around him, and we're going to see that shift from the Central to the West Division. So back to Minnesota and all of this. I mean, we've talked about these. We've talked about these rumors of Minnesota also losing maybe a couple key pieces on offense. Like, that gives me a little bit of uncertainty with them. Obviously, the uncertainty is going to be there with Chicago. I don't like Pawel's on-field effect. Obviously, he has been like the best handler in the league for the past 5 seasons, literally since he joined the league. And so losing that piece is huge. But Chicago does have like some talented young handlers. I still just think the gravity that Pawel brought and the way he like recruited this team together and really like united all of Chicago with the club scene and the AUDL team, I don't know if that stays intact to its fullest potential with Pawel gone. So I probably have the most uncertainty with Chicago, probably the next most uncertainty with Minnesota. And then I've talked about it before. I think Indy is going to kind of be in this position to claim the division for themselves. I mean, getting back Travis Carpenter, presumably, we still haven't seen any roster announcements from them, so we'll see how everything plays out. But in my mind right now, and based on the history of Minnesota, I'm not really that sold on them as much as I was before last season of this being their year. I mean, they're still very much in prove-it mode. And as much as I want it to be, I love when the team that hosts championship weekend is actually participating in championship weekend. I can't pencil them in quite yet, even though I don't even remember what I said for our championship weekend way too early predictions, however many weeks ago that was. I think I picked them because I want it to happen. I had to we both get it out into the world.
Yeah.
I think we both so I'm probably going to be rooting for them, but I'm still skeptical.
Yeah. Full disclosure, we've known a little bit of Pawel's departure for a bit now. It's been one of the things we've been trying to bite our tongues about. It's obviously a seismic
There's no way, by the way, just so everyone knows, there's no good way to like navigate this space of like ourselves as working for the league and like getting this inside knowledge, and then what becomes public, like what has to be under the table. I want people to understand, like we're not, some of this stuff is confidential. We're not quite allowed to talk freely about it until it's public knowledge. But yeah, continue.
All I was gonna say is that we've been in the know for Pawel's departure from Chicago to a possible competitor next year in the West. We just and with that, I think I've had some time to reflect on what the wake will kind of be like after his departure from the Union. And obviously there's going to be a hole that cannot be filled in any kind of realistic way. Like you've said, he's been the central atomic force at the center of this franchise for the better part of a decade. And I just don't think you replace that kind of impact, especially right away. I think one of the gifts that Janas leaves the Chicago franchise with, though, is the chip on the shoulder that they played with this past season. You know, they won the division in 2021. They pushed the then championship winning Carolina team to its brink in the semifinal matchup, brought them to overtime, only overtime game ever in championship weekend history. Union were right there with them. Even this year in the championship game, Chicago held it closer than people remember for the first 2.5 quarters. You know, they were only a goal or 3 behind. It felt more insurmountable because of how the Empire have been playing, and especially how they played in those 2 games in Madison. But Chicago has been right there. And while they're going to be losing a legend, I think that the parts in place, Ross Barker, Jeff Weiss, Sam Kaminsky, Kyle Rutledge, Paul Arders, if that core comes back, Jack Shanahan, that offensive core, if Nate Goff can pick up where he left off leading this defensive core and how good they were at situationally getting blocks in big games, I think that they're going to have a lot to play for. And I think that they have enough pride and enough winning at this point and enough talent that might really carry over. I'm not saying that I expect them to reappear at championship weekend. I don't know that I'm willing to commit to that, but like, that team set out to disprove you and I, all the Minnesota fans, everyone who doubted them, and they did it.
We doubted them.
They did it thoroughly. And so at this point, I don't know if I can make that same mistake twice of questioning what the Chicago franchise brings, because obviously a big part of that was the heart that Janas provided, but I think everyone, and kind of what you were saying, rallied and galvanized around him. And I think that energy stays. I think that Janas has given Chicago a pride that for all the talent that they've had since they came into the league in 2013, they never quite had. And I think that will last. Everything else, it's all up in the air now. All in the air. He was
I mean, that list of names you said, like, I agree with you. If those guys stick around, I mean, this is going to be just as difficult of a team to beat as they were with Pawel. Like, I think Pawel's on-field impact is huge, but they do have like a ton of talent from the top to the bottom of the roster. So yeah, it's a big if. I don't know like what the buy-in is going to be like without having him there, and like the way he's recruited this talent. Like, it's such a big draw to play with like one of the best handlers in the sport right now. And like, without that clear cut leader and quarterback of an offense, I don't know who slots in to that role. And I don't know if the same like enthusiasm for the team, for the offense, is going to be there. So I'm still going to be somewhat skeptical, but I don't disagree. Like, I think the effect he has brought to that team is still going to be there. It's still going to be intact. We'll just see to what extent that is the case.
I can't wait, man. This is the kind of news.
I know.
Especially knowing that he's going to go to the West.
January.
Like, we're about to get into it, man. And we hope that all of you join us along the way. We will be wrapping up this episode here today, but we will be back next week, every week going forward. We're set and we're locked in. We hope you are too. This is Swing Pass. Get ready.